What's going on, everybody? C4 here. Welcome to today's video where we're going to continue our 2019 draft prep and take a look at the top 10 defensive linemen in this year's draft class. Now, don't get it twisted. Edge rushers is going to be coming out Monday. There's going to be some players people are saying, "Oh, C4, where are these guys?" I'm breaking them up into D linemen and edge rushers specifically. For those of you saying, "Where's the Madden stuff?" We got to get through these videos, and I'm gonna hit you up with that double hitter on the weekend. On Saturday, we're getting a rebuild, and on Sunday, we're getting a fresh new replacements. So that being said, we are here for talking about the top 10 defensive linemen. Before we look at my new rankings, my 2.0, we should revisit my original ones. And in my original rankings, honorable mentions, I had Terry Beckner, Isaiah Buggs, Gerald Willis III. And in my top 10, it went number 10, Christian Wilkins, 9, Dre'mont Jones, 8, Jeffrey Simmons, 7, Jerry Tillery, 6, Derek Brown, who went back to school, 5 was Dexter Lawrence, 4 was Raekwon Davis, who went back to school, 3 was Rashod Gary, 2 was Quinnen Williams, and 1 was Ed Oliver. So flipping from that into my rankings 2.0, we will start with 4 honorable mentions. At 1, I have Isaiah Buggs from Alabama, just not consistent enough yet to crack the top 10. 2, I had Terry Beckner from Missouri. Was coming out as a huge high school recruit. I think he played some good football, and if he wasn't coming out this year and could have waited a year, which, I mean, it was impossible, I think next year he probably would have been probably a second-round pick. This year, like a lot of these guys the honor mentions, you're starting to talk about third, fourth round. I also like Ricky Walker from Virginia Tech and Rennell Wren, who is an absolute project but a tremendous athlete out of Arizona State. So from that, going into my official top 10, at number 10, we have Gerald Willis III, 6'4", 285 pounds, out of Miami. In 2018, he had 59 tackles, 18 TFLs, and 4 sacks. Now, he used to be a part of my Florida Gators, had some issues with teammates and the staff, and just pretty much left, had some off-the-field issues, which is definitely the biggest negative for Gerald Willis, because if you look at his Miami tape, he looks incredibly dominant. He's a very developed run stuffer. I think he can affect the pass with very, very good burst. Great first step. I mean, he is a little bit aggressive. Sometimes he can overextend a little bit on his tape, and you might be like, well, okay, kind of blowing your gap there. But that is all stuff that will get refined once he makes the jump to the National Football League. But the negatives is just obviously the limited snaps, because he's had trouble staying on the field and those off-the-field issues. But he's kind of had this, I'm a new guy kind of persona. That's what a bunch of scouts in this community are saying, that he's kind of, that's like what he's preaching to everyone that's interviewing him for the scouts and the NFL team. So, hey, he has that working for him. I think he's a really, really good interior. I think he's a perfect 3 technique, and I think he probably will go. And pretty much starting right away with number 10, we're already talking about guys that could very well go in the second round. I think Gerald Willis is more so a third-round prospect, but, he could potentially get into earlier day 2. But this draft class is just terrifying. And I would say after Gerald Willis, just because he has that off the field going from 9 on, we're talking about guys that could very well sneak into the first round, have them definitely graded between 1 and 2. So Gerald Willis at 10. Going to number 9, we have Charles Omenihu, 6'6", 275 from Texas. In 2018, he had 45 tackles, 18 TFLs, 9.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. When you look at him, his prototypical size, he's just an unbelievable frame, very well built. He's a great athlete. I personally kind of view him as a 3-4 defensive end with an upside, with a very high ceiling, while some people could see him as a 4-3 end. Some people, he has that, we're going to have to wait and see at the combine. What kind of numbers is he going to put up? What kind of strength does he actually possess? Because, we've seen guys with great, tremendous physiques, such as, Sean Oakman. Shout out to the replacements. Not really be able to put it all together when it comes to testing. I think Omenihu definitely will help himself. He had a good Senior Bowl. The negatives, I'm using what I really didn't see any. I watched a bunch of his chop-ups from his senior season, but using the Draft Network and kind of correlating that with a couple other draft sites, tight hips and a low football IQ are kind of the common enemies that go against him. Anyway, the football IQ is not drastically a negative for him. It's just one of those things. It could be a little bit more refined, blowing up plays and understanding, hey, maybe, should hold my assignment, not just always get, deer in the headlights kind of look and go right for the pass rusher. But ultimately, we kind of crap on the Big 12 defenses. I think he might be as good as anyone that's coming out of the Big 12 in the last couple years from a defensive line standpoint. He has that kind of upside, and he's still coming in at number 9 on my list. I'm always looking at towards next year. I think obviously he's a senior, but again, kind of going back to some of these players we've already talked about in the honorable mentions and Gerald Willis. If these guys are coming out next year, they have a chance to be top 5. It is just the strength of the draft class, and like I said, I would not be shocked at all if someone just sees the athletic traits and the upside of of a freak like Omenihu and puts a first-round grade on him. But for me, I think he's a second-round pick. Going to number 8 is going to be Dre'mont Jones, 6'3", 285 pounds, out of Ohio State. In 2018, he had 43 tackles, 13 TFLs, 8.5 sacks, a pick, and a forced fumble. For me, he is a NASCAR dream package player. You know what that is? Essentially, when you put like a defensive end, a defensive tackle, like think about it like a Madden. You know, in Madden, when you get those specialty packages, it's kind of like that. Like Philadelphia utilized it a lot with Michael Bennett there. I think a guy like Dre'mont Jones is going to be tremendous there, which kind of makes him a little bit scheme dependent. I personally think he's going to be better as a 4-3 tackle, which he would be, slightly undersized. But then again, looking at Aaron Donald, what's really undersized anymore? But a lot of people do have him pigeonholed kind of as a 3-4 defensive end. I think he's much more better suited to being a pass rusher, a guy that affects the pocket from a 4-3 scheme. When you look at the negatives, though, of Dre'mont Jones, while he is clearly built to get after the quarterback, he doesn't offer much as a run defender. I don't really know how much better he can get as well as a run defender. So I think because of the scheme, in the right scheme, he's going to be definitely worth a high pick. I think that if he was obviously a little bit bigger, a tad better against the run, a tad more well-balanced, he would be a lock to go in the first round. But because he is so good, if he goes to the right scheme for what you would want him to be, if you've got a team that likes to run the NASCAR package, you need someone, a guy like Dre'mont Jones is going to be outstanding, and I think he will go in the second round for sure. Going to number 7, we have Jerry Tillery, 6'7", 305 pounds, out of Notre Dame. In 2018, he had 28 tackles, 8.5 TFLs, 7 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. When you look at Jerry Tillery, you see incredibly high upside. He has tremendous size, still kind of growing in his body. Probably when you look at his frame, could add another 10 pounds. So it'll be 315. Then you can get a little bit more flexible where he plays on the defensive line and what scheme he can go in. But I definitely think he can add a little bit more strength. And when you look at the negatives, his run defense isn't really as refined as his pass rushing ability, which kind of like Dre'mont Jones in a way, kind of will make him one-dimensional as a rookie. He'll have to go to the right scheme, have to be utilized the correct way. But I unlike Dre'mont Jones, I think Jerry Tillery has the frame and the size to be able to bulk up a little bit to help, sustain blocks a little bit better at the next level, to help against the run. I think I have been higher on him than a lot of other people here during this draft process. I'm not going to say necessarily I warmed on him because I had him at 7 in my first rankings, and he's still sticking here at 7. But again, if this was another year, could be a guy that sneaks into the first round. But because there's so much talent and he's not as complete as some of these other players we're going to be talking about, he's going to be somewhere on the second round come draft day. Going to D lineman number 6, I have Dexter Lawrence, 6'4", 340 pounds, out of Clemson. In 2018, 36 tackles, 7 TFLs, a sack and a half, and an interception. You look at Dexter Lawrence, he is built like a nose tackle, but he has tremendous athletic ability for his size. Like, you look around at somewhat the rumors are going to be for his 40-yard dash time. Some people think there is a slim chance he might be able to get into those 4.9s, like a 4.99, a 4.98. I don't necessarily see that quick. But when you see a guy that's 340 pounds, you're thinking he's going to run. He's going to be the funny. He's going to be the laughing stock of the combine because when he runs the 40, it's got to look hilarious. He's got to run like a 5.5. I think there's a legitimate shot he gets in the 5.1s, which is ridiculous for a man of his size. He's a tremendous athlete. I think if you do try to pigeonhole him as a nose tackle, which he probably will get stuck at in the National Football League, he's going to bring a lot of athletic ability. Like, I see shades of Vince Wilfork when Dexter Lawrence is, on the top of his game. But when you look at the negatives, the nose tackle position is a little bit undervalued. I think that if he was obviously with his athletic ability, it's more so his body type. But if he was 320 pounds and could be viewed more as a 4-3 tackle or something like that, he'd definitely be a lock to go in the first round. I think he has limited pass rushing ability, much more effective against the run and eating up gaps. And that failed drug test, which, if you follow anything about college football, it was kind of the big story for Clemson going into their playoffs. About Dexter Lawrence being able to go without him, and they actually played pretty well without Dexter Lawrence, which, for whatever reason, that could kind of go against him, because they're like, well, look, this team still played well without you. How important were you really? But I don't think, the best talent evaluators in the National Football League are going to fall for that. There's plenty of teams that run that 3-4, or teams that will be switching to a 3-4 that will absolutely value a Dexter Lawrence. For me, I think he's a first, second round pick. I personally would have a first round grade on him, but I do think with that off the field, he could slip into the second round, but no further than that. Now we are here in the top 5, and at number 5, we have Jeffrey Simmons, 6'4", 300 pounds, out of Mississippi State. In 2018, he had 63 tackles, 18 TFLs, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. Now, news just dropped the other day that he will not be allowed to attend the combine, which, kind of sucks for him. I think, who else was it? Preston Williams, the wide receiver from Colorado State, who I think is also a pretty promising and intriguing prospect, wasn't allowed because, basically now if you have like a domestic thing, you're not going to be able to go to the combine. I'm not going to say I necessarily disagree with that. I think, you should technically be viewing the combine as a reward, another opportunity to showcase yourself, and they kind of want to hold that against some players with off-the-field issues. I'm not necessarily going to oppose that. So that kind of is already a negative for Jeffrey Simmons off the bat, which goes into, we might as well do the negatives first. Obviously, his character concerns. There's a video of him just beating the shit out of some chick, which wasn't great. It was one of those stories where, it wasn't just like he just started mauling a chick. I think there were some issues going back and forth. But ultimately, horrible look for Jeffrey Simmons. And when you look at actually on the tape, I think he can blow his run assignments. He gets that deer in the headlights and wants to go all out every single play to affect the pass. And sometimes when he clearly, hey, stand there and let's play run defense, you might just see him. I'm not going to say he's blowing assignments purposely, but I saw a couple plays, at least on tape, that stood out to me that was like, at least it looked like, okay, you should be playing the run here, and then you think, maybe you can bite on a play action or something like that. You're going to leave your assignment because you think you can go out and make a play. I don't know if that's necessarily true. That's just kind of what I saw as a negative. But when you look at the positives, I think he's a very, very good athlete. He has developed pass rushing moves. He is going to be a day one starter for whatever team takes a jump on him, unless he goes to an elite defensive line. Then he'll be more of a rotational guy, but definitely a lock for the first round. I think if he didn't have the off the field and was able to go to the combine and show off his skills, I think he'd have a chance to maybe be a lock for top 15 in the draft. But I think for right now, still with the character issues, pencil him right in there for the first round. A pro comparison, I see a lot of Sheldon Richardson. Remember Sheldon Richardson? Remember he was at the Jets? Remember this guy here? Defensive Rookie of the Year type player. I see a lot of similarities between him and Jeffrey Simmons' game. And, hey, maybe a little bit on the off-the-field. I mean, I didn't make the comparison because of that, but Sheldon Richardson did struggle with a little bit of the off-the-field issues while he was with the Jets. It was something crazy, like he was, speeding with an infant in the car, something crazy like that. But either way, yeah, Jeffrey Simmons, see a lot of comparisons to Sheldon Richardson. Not so much at Mizzou because this is a pro comparison, but looking at some of the best that Sheldon Richardson brought while he's with the Jets and a little bit here with the Minnesota Vikings, I see a lot of Jeffrey Simmons' game. Going to number 4 is going to be Quinnen Williams, 6'4", 300 pounds, out of Clemson. In 2018, he had 51 tackles, 14 TFLs, 5.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. Looking at the positives for Mr. Quinnen Williams, I think he's a very versatile player. I think he can play the pass, he can play the run. There's no glaring weakness in his game from a technical aspect. I think he has a very high floor, which kind of goes into the negative, where I think he might have the lowest ceiling of the elite top-tier defensive lineman prospects in this draft. I think because he's not an elite athlete, technique will only get you so far. And when you're talking about the guys that are put slightly ahead of him, I think they have maybe not as much refinement as Quinnen Williams is bringing, but they are much better athletes, which therefore gives them a better ceiling. Because if and when they can put it all together, they're going to have that going for them. But I'm not saying necessarily Wilkins is a bad athlete. I just think the guys that we're talking about ahead of him are truly elite athletes. I think if Quinnen Williams went last year in the draft, which he could have, he decided to go back to Clemson, I think he could have been maybe the first defensive lineman off the board. Or is he coming this year? And judging by my rankings, he could very well be the 4th. I think he's absolutely a lock for the first round. Pro comparison for me is Gerald McCoy of the Tampa Bay Bucks. Might be saying asterisk there. Gerald McCoy looks like he might be moving on from the Tampa Bay Bucks. But I'm seeing a lot of similarities between their games. Gerald McCoy was not an elite athlete, a good athlete coming out of Oklahoma, but I think he was pretty well developed. There's no real weakness when Gerald McCoy was coming out, and I see a lot of similarities between his game and what Quinnen Williams has been able to do at Clemson. Going to defensive lineman number 3, I have Rashod Gary, 6'5", 290 pounds, out of Michigan. When you look at his 2018 stats, he had 38 tackles, 6.5 TFLs, and 3 sacks. When you look at the positives of Rashod Gary, he is an exceptional athlete, and judging by where you're looking in the scouting community, a lot of people think he could put up and could be like the headliner, the show-stealing performance from the scouting combine. I'm going to say, I'm at least looking at his tape, he looks really good, but I don't see that wow. Like, oh my God, this guy's gonna rip. Everyone knew Jadeveon Clowney was gonna just wreck up the combine. Everyone knew Myles Garrett was gonna just dominate the combine. I don't really see that with Rashod Gary, but I'm not gonna outright deny that. I'm gonna be very intrigued about how well he plays at the combine. But look at the negatives for Rashod Gary. I think the production wasn't always there. And what position will he play in the NFL? Because he's at a little bit of a tweener. Is he a 3-4 end? Is he a 4-3 defensive tackle? Can he be a 4-3 defensive end? Because that, I kind of hold that as a negative. That could be viewed as versatility. I kind of see it more so as an unknown, a question mark, which could kind of hold him back. And I think clearly puts him in the second tier Like right now, Rashod Gary, Christian Wilkins, and probably Jeffrey Simmons, and maybe Dexter Lawrence, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'd probably put in tier 2 of my defensive line rankings. But when you look at Rashod Gary, like I said, man, you see a guy that shows flashes, that shows explosive plays, can affect the run, can affect the pass. And while every time I've seen him, I'm going to say he's slightly underwhelmed. Enough people are higher than that watch all of Michigan's games, and I'm going to trust him because I could see the flashes. My pro comparison from him is Leonard Williams, a slightly better Leonard Williams. In terms of athletic ability, Leonard Williams came into USC, was definitely a bona fide first-round pick. I thought the year Leonard Williams was coming out, he was the best defensive lineman in the class, but he slipped because of the quarterbacks. I'm pretty sure that was the Jameis Winston-Mariota year. But yeah, now actually looks like Leonard Williams might be looking for a job soon. But I think, yeah, Rashod Gary for me, slightly better athlete than Leonard Williams, but both have a lot of upside. I think if Rashod Gary can go to a place that has a good D-line coach, a good DC that is proven in developing players, sky is the limit for Rashod Gary. Might as well put that into the positives. I think he has a very, very high ceiling. Now, going to number 2 in my rankings, I have Quinnen Williams, 6'4", 290 pounds, out of Alabama. In 2018, he had 71 tackles, 19.5 tackles for loss, and 8 sacks. When you look at the positives, he is an absolute unreal first step, very similar to what Aaron Donald had at Pitt. I think he's a relentless pass rusher, a tremendous motor. He has everything that you want in a franchise defensive lineman. You want to see a guy that can, also, obviously you play for Alabama. You got to affect the run, baby. You got to stop that SEC run. He can do it. You got to affect those less than stellar SEC quarterbacks. He can do it. You want to see a guy that has just the motor. You want to see a guy with a decent football IQ. He has all of those things. But the negatives for him, I would not be surprised if he kind of underwhelms at the combine. The last known 40-yard dash time, and obviously maybe more so the 10-yard split support, more important for defensive linemen, but he was running like the 5.2s. Now, that was a long time ago. I think people said that was like when he was coming out of high school. And then there's a big argument, I think it was on Reddit, about how some players, like that's their 40-yard dash time. How much time does that get shaved off and stuff like that going to college? And some players, it's the exact same. They run the exact same time. Some players, obviously, get a little bit more refined, get a little bit more technique. But I'm kind of saying, like, what if Quintin Williams does run in the 5.2s again? What if he's just not that fast? Will that go against his stock, especially if someone like Rashod Gary balls out of control? But for me, that's just kind of the only question mark. You're really, really nitpicking at this point because I think he is as complete of a defensive line prospect that we've seen in quite some time. Another negative for Quinnen Williams could be, the fact that he's had somewhat limited snaps throughout his career, just because there's been so much talent at Alabama. It's not like he's been starting for 2-3 seasons and has all that tape lined up. So there is that mystique around him because no one knows him as well as some of the other players that we're talking about. But still, very, very good. His pro comparison for me is kind of Fletcher Cox. I mean, obviously, Fletcher Cox and Quinnen Williams are vastly different athletes. Fletcher Cox is like 10, 15 pounds heavier, a lot more stronger, a little bit different player. But Quinnen Williams, from a technique standpoint, the way they get off their blocks, the way that they play on the defensive line looked incredibly similar. Now, obviously, it's always going to be easier for me to make a comparison to a Philadelphia Eagle because that's what I see. And when I watch that tape, it just jumps out the board like, man, that is a lot of what Fletcher Cox was doing the last couple of years here for the Philadelphia Eagles. So not from a body type, not really from an athletic standpoint, but from a technique, from the way that they play, I see a lot of similarities between Quinnen Williams and Fletcher Cox. Big praise. But going to number 1, he's always been my number 1. He's number 1 in my heart, baby. And that's Ed Oliver. 6'2", 295, probably more closer to 290. From Houston in 2018. He only played in 8 games. He had 54 tackles, 14.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and a forced fumble. The positives, he is a freak athlete. He's had insane production over the last 3 years. I remember he was an 18-year-old true freshman and had like 20-some tackles for loss. Incredible. And then after that, he was still putting up like 17, 18 tackles for loss year after year against double and triple teams. Because you're going against Houston, you stop one player. The fact that he's been able to be as productive as he has been when clearly every team's offense goes all in to stop him is what is absolutely outstanding. I think at the combine, he's got ball out of control. He literally has like the same agility as a linebacker, same athletic ability as like an elite defensive end. And he has the body of most likely, I would like to think, a 3 technique in the National Football League. Now, the only negatives you can kind of hold against him, there's a couple. If you really want to nitpick, what position and scheme can he play? He's not really an ideal fit anywhere, but I think you find a way. You find a way to make him fit. The level of competition kind of could be brought up because, he played for Houston. They're going up against, AAC or something like that competition. And he has good, not great strength. He's not going to lie. I would not be surprised for him. Maybe he has a shot at putting up 30 on the bench press, but he's not going to put up that 34, 35 that you like to see from these scary prospects like we saw with like Myles Garrett a couple years ago. But my pro comparison for him is a less powerful Aaron Donald. If You look at Aaron Donald's tape at Pitt, you look at Aaron Donald's tape at Houston, you see almost the exact same player. I mean, I think you can see maybe a little bit better, like I said, with Aaron Donald. He had a little bit more power, so his hand fighting was a little bit better, a little bit more refined. But from an athletic standpoint, the way they just blow up plays consistently, their burst, it almost mirrors each other. Now, obviously, Aaron Donald was able to go as a top-regarded prospect from Pitt. If you go back, I think I still have that video up. When he was coming out, I said Aaron Donald's going to be the best defensive lineman in this class. I'm a huge fan of him, and I'm sick and tired of people holding his size against him. I'm going to be saying the same things here for Ed Oliver. Ed Oliver is a freak of nature. In my opinion, he should go. I'm not going to say he should go number 1. I think he's the best player in the draft. I think he's better than Nick Bosa. I've always had that. I've always maintained that. Not that when we got into the nitty-gritty here of the draft process, I'm going to overthink things and try to change my rate. Ed Oliver's been my number 1 before the season started. He was my number 1 last year during last year's draft. I'm not changing it. I'm just not going to change it. But I can understand that Nick Bosa could go ahead of him because Nick Bosa is a clear, high upside, elite defensive end. Where someone like Ed Oliver, I can understand that some teams, especially DCs, are like, I don't know how to use him. I don't think we should use the top 3 or 4 pick on a guy that I'm not sure how to use. That's more so them, not a reflection of how good Ed Oliver is going to be. So very high on him. I think it's going to be interesting, very interesting to see between him and especially Quintin Williams, who emerges as the best defensive lineman from this class. Give me like 4 or 5 years down the road. But for right now, give me Big Ed O from Houston at number 1. So there you go, guys. Those are my defensive line rankings for the upcoming draft. Do you agree or disagree with any of the rankings you saw here today? Let me know in the comment section below if I'm sleeping on somebody, but I think we did a pretty good job here today of nailing all the prospects and giving you guys somewhat of an idea of what they're in. Hopefully, you're able to find a couple new players that you think you really want your team to draft at the upcoming draft. But thank you guys for watching. Subscribe if you're new. We still got, a couple more. We got edge, linebacker, corner, and safety rankings to come. And then from that, we're going to be running into the 7-round mock drafts for all 32 teams. Don't want you guys missing out on that draft content. Plus, we got so much more Madden stuff coming in the coming months. It is going to be ridiculous. So subscribe if you're new. Smash the like button if you enjoyed. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.